All right, the second video for chapter 22. What are the major urban resource and environmental problems? Well, to summarize it, most cities are unsustainable because of high levels of resource use, waste, pollution, and poverty. Okay, so while there are distinct advantages of urbanization, we talked about access to healthcare, and other services. Those are real advantages. Where if you're in an area where there are lots of people, then services are going to be established that can meet the people's needs because they can benefit more people. There is more economic development. There are more job opportunities often in urban areas. This can lead to innovation. Education tends to be available more so than in outlying areas, like in rural areas. You're not going to find colleges very often, and other things as well. Transportation is also more readily available because it's been planned into infrastructure for urban areas. People that live in urban areas tend to live longer. Their kids survive better. Their infancy. There's better healthcare, better services in general, social services included, more recycling programs, lots of benefits to urbanization. Also thinking about if we urbanize, then people aren't disrupting the outlying ecosystems. And so they're better able to preserve biodiversity in other areas. These are real strengths and good arguments for urbanization. But that said, there are some real drawbacks as well. I mentioned water problems earlier. They tend to have water problems both in use, like how much water they require, and then also in what do you do with the gray water or the wastewater. You've got a huge population contributing to water that needs to be treated. There tends to be a lack of green spaces, lack of vegetation in urban areas, and they tend to have huge ecological footprints. So because they're not producing a lot of things, because they're relying on, vehicles maybe to get around, excuse me, a very small high density area can have a huge ecological footprint for that given area. So they also tend to concentrate pollution, and there are health problems that come from that pollution. There's a lot of noise, and then also they disrupt microclimates and other climate, around in and around it because of the dense population and all the activity that's happening in these urban areas. Also light pollution. Bummer not to see the stars in the city. So the inputs, I think there's another picture, here we go, into an urban area, such as, this is London as an example. There's energy, food, water, raw materials, manufactured goods, money, information. And what we get out of that, we get ideas and wealth and manufactured goods. So there's a lot of good stuff, but you also get noise and greenhouse gas, other pollutants, waste heat, solid wastes. And so those are your outputs. So we do get some very desirable things, but we also get some, well, the not so good as well. Noise levels of some common sounds, just to give you an idea of where things are at. A quiet rural area would be right around 30 decibels. And we can see a factory is up at 80 decibels, and you get permanent hearing damage over 8 hours if you're at an 85 decibel range or higher. It can be really loud in cities, and that noise pollution can be damaging to your hearing if you're exposed to it long enough and frequently enough. Earbuds at loud level, permanent damage. Be careful, guys. So there also can be some serious stratification in cities. There, in many large cities, you're going to find slums as well. The urban poor will be in these areas. You can have, squatter settlements where people will just find a property and this has maybe been abandoned and occupy it. There are, often terrible living conditions in some of these areas. And a good question is, what can governments do to help? In the U.S., this looks like a homeless population. And what do you do? How do you help the homeless population that's living in these conditions? Do you just clear them out and call it good, or do you work to find a place for them to live? Do you provide small, tiny homes for them? It's a real struggle for a lot of municipalities, especially larger areas, right now. And different cities are tackling this in different ways. This is a look at what some of the slums in Rio, and yeah, they're really remarkable. Very poor conditions and not very sanitary at all, and lots of like sewage and water goes untreated. They don't have vital services there. Often, crime can be high in these areas as well. So how do you do that? And you can see in this image up here that you have very nearby these much more affluent areas. So stratification on display. In Mexico City, a very populous city, lots and lots of people there, over 20 million. There has been severe air pollution and water pollution there, high unemployment, it's very noisy, it's overcrowded, so lots of problems with associated with living there. About a third live in slums or squatter settlements. So how do you tackle something like this? You have all these people lacking opportunity, and what do you do? It's a puzzling question. And this is what Mexico City looks like with its smog as well. Densely populated. All right. In the third section, how does transportation affect urban environmental impacts? In some countries, many people live in widely dispersed urban areas and depend mostly on motor vehicles for their transportation, which greatly expands their ecological footprints. So we in America have a tendency to grow outward and not upward. This is not the case everywhere. In other places, so in these examples, Hong Kong, Tokyo, mass transit is critical in these densely populated areas. It would be normal to not have a car, for example, because you don't need one, because you can just take the transit anywhere you need to go. And people have moved into high rises, and it's just densely populated. So, and part of that is if space isn't available to expand outwards, the cities have naturally grown upward. And we see in Hong Kong and Tokyo this happen. Whereas in the US, because there's more space, tends to be more space, although that might be changing, and we have a car-centered lifestyle. I think much of what is in the US is based on the car. We spread outward rather than upward. There are, with this car culture, there are some real good things that come with it. It is great to have the convenience of being able to jump in the car and go somewhere, whether it's to the store or to an appointment somewhere or to go mushroom hunting or something. You can jump in the car and you can do that. Having cars provides a lot of jobs, a lot of repair shops, a lot of work goes into producing fuel and distribution of it. Lots of work and jobs and building roads and all the materials that go into that as well. And in the U.S., a car is often seen, it is also seen as a status symbol. Cars are not entirely safe. They lead to or are involved in lots of accidents each year, kill millions of animals each year, huge source of outdoor air pollution, and help to create this urban sprawl, and never mind congestion, which is just adding to the pollution. This is LA, this tangle of freeways here, and you can see in the background here all this suburban area over here. People live out there and they commute. They drive to their jobs somewhere else. They don't necessarily live close to where they work, and this car culture has really fed that, and the availability of roads to get there is also part of that. Yeah, it's hard to pull people away from their cars once they get used to them. Uh, there are some things that can be done to reduce automobile usage. We talk about education fairly regularly. That's one thing that can be do is to educate consumers about their options. You could construct better mass transit in the U.S. There is not good transit in a lot of places around the U.S. And if you get out of a huge city, often it's very much not great. So yeah, this whole lack of good public transit is a real problem. Rapid mass transit is expensive, and people in the U.S. tend to not want to be taxed, and so it's difficult to pass rapid mass transit in a lot of areas. Strong public opposition for some reason, but there is a good argument against rapid mass transit in the fact that so much of the U.S. population is dispersed so much. There aren't a lot of high density areas, so those are some challenges facing people that are trying to pass rapid mass transit. Though it could be useful, and it could be really good at decreasing our output of pollution and footprint in global footprint if we can make that happen, take cars off the road. So some ways we can discourage car usage is to raise parking fees, charge people to go into major cities, charge tolls. Car sharing can help. So services like Uber and Lyft, those also help. So zip cars is an interesting thing as well. These zip cars are cars that you can rent for just when you need them and by the hour. And so you don't have to own a car. You just get online and get a zip car. Other things that cities can do is, provide safe avenues for bicycles to get around cities. More and more larger cities especially are doing that. Have rail systems, provide buses that go regularly and frequently, and rapid rail between urban areas too. So some trade-offs with bicycles, they're quiet, they don't burn fossil fuels, little no parking space, but accidents can be bad and not really good for long trips. And secure bike parking is not yet widespread, so and also it's easy to steal somebody's mode of transportation. So that's a drawback. For mass transit rail, it's pretty energy efficient, uses less land than roads and parking lots. Not a whole lot of injuries involved, but they're expensive, and to really be cost effective, it needs to be in densely populated areas. For buses, they do reduce car usage. They can be rerouted quickly, easily, cheaper than heavy rail, but they can lose money because they require affordable fares. They still are susceptible to traffic jams and rider schedules. Your schedule is bound to the schedule of the buses, so that's a drawback. Rapid rail is very expensive to run and maintain. It does cause noise. There is some risk of collisions, but it's a whole lot less air pollution than, for example, airplanes, and it gets you there in a comparable, it's longer, but in a much more green way. So there you go. Potential routes for high-speed bullet trains in the U.S. There are some that they've started work on in some of these areas, but these are connecting very densely populated areas. All right, we're going to pick up this in the next video.